All right, friends, here we are back one more time to finish out the story, Fantastic Mr. Fox by Roald Dahl. Chapter 16, The Woman. Quick, said Mr. Fox, hide! He and Badger and the smallest fox jumped up on the shelf and crouched behind a row of big cider jars. Peering around the jars, they saw a huge woman coming down into the cellar. At the foot of the steps, the woman paused, looking to the right and then to the left. Then she turned and headed straight for the place where Mr. Fox and Badger and the smallest fox were hiding. She stopped right in front of them. The only thing between her and them was a row of cider jars. She was so close. Mr. Fox could hear the sound of her breathing. Peering through the cracks between the two bottles, he noticed that she was carrying a big rolling pin in one of her hands. How many will he want this time? Mrs. Bean, how many? The woman shouted. And from the top of the steps, the other voice barked back. Bring up 2 or 3 jars. He drank 4 yesterday, Mrs. Bean. Yes, but he won't want that many today because he's not going to be up there more than a few hours longer. He says the fox is bound to make a run for it this morning. It can't possibly stay down in that hole another day without food. The woman in the cellar reached out and lifted a jar of cider from the shelf. The jar she took was next to the one of the jars behind which Mr. Fox was crouching. I'll be glad when that rotten brute is killed and strung up on the porch, she called out. And by the way, Mrs. Bean, your husband promised I could have the tail as a souvenir. The tail's been shot to pieces, the voice called from upstairs. Didn't you know that? You mean it's ruined? Of course it's ruined. They shot the tail but missed the fox. Oh, heck, said the big woman. I did so want that tail. You can have the head instead, Mabel. You can get that stuffed and hung on your bedroom wall. Hurry up now with that cider. Yes, ma'am, I'm coming, said the big woman, and took a second jar from the shelf. If she takes one more, she'll see us, thought Mr. Fox. He could feel the smallest fox's body pressed tightly against his own, quivering with excitement. Will 2 be enough? Will 2 be enough, Miss Bean, or shall I take 3? My goodness, Mabel, I don't care as long as you just get a move on. It's 2 then, said the huge woman, speaking to herself. He drinks too much anyway. Carrying a jug in each hand, and with the rolling pin tucked under her arm, she walked away, crossing the cellar. At the foot of the steps, she paused. The fox is over here. At the foot of the steps, she paused, looked around, and sniffed the air. There's rats down here again, Miss Bean. I can smell them. Then poison them, woman, poison them. You know where the poison is kept. Yes, ma'am, said Mabel. She climbed slowly out of sight up the stairs and slammed the door. Quick, said Mr. Fox. Grab a jar each and run for it. The fox stood high on his shelf and shrieked. What did I tell ya? You nearly got nabbed, didn't you? You nearly gave the game away. You keep out of here from now on. I don't want you round here. It's my place. You, said Mr. Fox, are going to get poisoned. Poppycock, said the rat. I sit up here and watch her put the stuff down there. She'll never get me. Mr. Fox, Badger, and the smallest fox ran across the cellar, clutching a gallon jar each. Goodbye, rat, they called out, and they disappeared through the hole in the wall. Thanks for the lovely cider. Thieves, shrieked Rat. Robbers, bandits, burglars! Chapter 17, The Great Feast. Back in the tunnel, they paused so that Mr. Fox could brick up the hole in the wall again. He was humming to himself as he put the bricks back in place. "I can still taste that glorious cider," he said. "Oh, and that stupid rat." "He does have bad manners," said Badger. "All rats have bad manners. I have never yet met a polite one." "And he just drinks too much," said Mr. Fox, putting the last brick into place. "There we are now. Okay, home to the feast." They all grabbed their jars of cider, and off they went. Mr. Fox was in front, the smallest fox came next, and Badger was last. Along the tunnel they flew, past the turns that led to Bunce's mighty storehouse, past Bogus's chicken house number 1, and then up the long home stretch towards the place where they knew Mrs. Fox would be waiting. "Keep it up, my darlings," shouted Mr. Fox. "We'll be there soon. Just think what's waiting for us at the other end. Oh, just think what we're bringing home with us in these jars. That ought to cheer up poor Mrs. Fox." And Mr. Fox sang a little song as he ran. Home again swiftly I glide, back to my beautiful bride. She'll not feel so rotten as soon as she gotten some cider inside her insides." Then Badger joined in. "Oh, poor Mrs. Badger," he cried, "so hungry that she very nearly died. She'll not feel so hollow if only she'll swallow some cider inside her insides." They were still singing as they rounded the final corner and bursted in upon the most wonderful, amazing sight any of them had ever seen. A feast was about to begin. A large dining room had been hollowed out in the earth, and in the middle of it, seated around a huge table, were no less than 29 animals. There were, give you this look here. There were Mrs. Fox and the 3 small foxes, Mrs. Badger and the 3 small badgers, Mole, Mrs. Mole, and 4 small moles, Rabbit, Mrs. Rabbit, and 5 small rabbits, Weasel, Mrs. Weasel, and 6 small weasel. The table was covered with chickens and ducks and geese and ham and bacon, and everyone was tucking into their lovely food. "My darling!" cried Mrs. Fox, jumping up and hugging Mr. Fox. "We couldn't wait. Please forgive us." Then she hugged the smallest fox of all. Mrs. Badger hugged Badger, and everyone hugged everyone else. Amid the shouts of joys, the great jars of cider were placed upon the table, and Mr. Fox and Badger and the smallest fox sat down with the others. You must remember, no one had eaten a thing for several days. They were ravenous. So for a while there was no conversation at all. There was only the sound of crunching and chewing as the animals attacked the succulent food. At last Badger stood up. He raised his glass of cider and shouted, "A toast! I want you all to stand and drink a toast to our dear friend who has saved our lives this day, Mr. Fox! To Mr. Fox!" They all shouted, standing up and raising their glasses. "To Mr. Fox! Long may he live!" Then Mrs. Fox got shyly to her feet and said, "I don't want to make a speech. I just want to say one thing, that my husband is a fantastic fox." Everyone clapped and cheered and hooted and hollered. Then Mr. Fox stood himself. "This delicious meal," he began, and then he stopped. In the silence that followed, he let fly a tremendous belch. There was laughter among clapping. This delicious meal, my friends, he went on, is by courtesy of Messieurs Bogus, Bunce, and Bean. More cheering and laughter came. And I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have. And he let another colossal belch fly. Better out than in, said Badger. Thank you, Mr. Fox said, grinning hugely. But now, my friends, let us be serious. Let us think of tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. If we go out, we will be killed, right? Right, they all shouted. We'll be shot before we've gone a yard, said Badger. Exactly, said Mr. Fox. But who wants to go out anyway? Let me ask you this. We are all diggers, every one of us. We hate the outside. The outside is full of enemies and danger. We only go out because we have to get food for our families. But now, my friends, we have an entirely new setup. We have a safe tunnel leading to 3 of the finest stores in the world. We do indeed, said Badger. I've seen them. And you know what this means? Do you all? Asked Mr. Fox. It means that none of us will ever need to go out into the world or the open again. There was an excitement around the table, and I therefore invite you all, Mr. Fox went on, to stay here with me forever. Forever, they all cried. My goodness, how marvelous! And Rabbit said to Mrs. Rabbit, my dear, just think, we're never going to be shot at again in our lives. We will make, said Mr. Fox, a little underground village with streets and houses on each side, separate houses for the badgers and the moles and the rabbits and the weasels and the foxes. And every day I will go shopping for you all, and every day we will eat like kings. The cheering that followed this speech went on for minutes. Chapter 18. Still waiting. Outside the fox's hole, Bogus, Bunce, and Bean sat beside their tents with their guns on their laps. It began to rain. Water was trickling down the necks of the 3 men and then into their shoes. He won't stay down there much longer, Bogus said. The brute must be famished, Bunce said. That's right, said Bean. He'll be making a dash any moment now. Keep your guns handy. They sat there by the hole, waiting for the fox to come out. And so far as I know, they are still waiting. The end. I hope you have enjoyed the story.